Well, good morning. Representative Spence Hawley, Democrat leader for the House, along with Senator Billy Sutton, Democrat leader for the Senate. We're getting close now to some final decisions, and I think that's what everybody's been waiting for. Today, as you know, is official crossover day, so we have to have everything out of the House and the Senate, vice versa. We did our semi-crossover day yesterday. We just have a very small handful of bills to finish today, so most of the topics of discussion and where we're headed, I think, have been laid out in front of us for the next 2 weeks. So this last week in the House side, we a couple different areas. Alcohol was a topic, as you know. We took out the farm winery bill. We had a restaurant bar bill that came out, and the distillers and ciders we took care of, and the beer came out of the other side over there. We had the initiated measures discussion again. It's a weekly discussion. Sent some bills out. The positive news from our side is that some of the bills were defeated this time. Finally, the 5% of petitions that have to be signed in each Senate district, that was defeated. So some of those were defeated this time. We did have the governor's licensure bill came up in the House. We had passed it out of the State Affairs. It went to the floor, and it was defeated on the floor. And I think from my standpoint, and I think it kind of went across, the need was not sold on why we need to do it. The only comments we got, this is a workforce development issue, and it's going to help workforce development. And then as we tried to drill down who is going to be able to come into South Dakota, most of our professional organizations already have a method worked out. And the majority did not see the benefit of adding this compact in. And finally, the other positive news that came out of the House was we had HGR 1004. That's the Marcy's Law discussion, and this was really positive news. Representative Mickelson from the House side, along with the governor's office and law enforcement and state's attorneys, met with the Marcy's folks from California and here, and they came to an agreement on what needs to be fixed in Marcy's Law that we passed on the ballot last time. And the fixes came to an agreement, and it was a unanimous down on the floor that we need to send this to the ballot, which goes over to the Senate now, and fix it. Probably the only topic of discussion that potentially could come up, the Marcy's Law people had wanted this to go into primary. We have a problem with the primary vote because that's not where the majority of our population votes. It's in the general election. And if from the Democrat side, if Senator Sutton doesn't have a primary and our others don't, there'd be a low turnout from our side. And so we just don't think it should be in the primary. They were agreeable to that, to not put that amendment on, and I thanked them for that. So, and there were several other items, not sure you got questions, but that's kind of what happened in the House this week.
Yeah, Billy Sutton, District 21, Senate Democratic leader. We've had some interesting discussions as well on our side. Probably not as much about the initiated measure and referendum process as the House has had with all the bills over there. In appropriations, we're busy setting the budget, and we have a lot of work to do there. We also have a lot of work to do to prioritize the dollars that we have available and how those dollars are going to be targeted. I think it's going to be important that we focus on high-need providers, community support providers, and making sure that we fulfill our obligation to K-12 education, and then state employees are part of that conversation as well. You know, one of the things that I've been disappointed in this session is lack of discussion about workforce development. You know, we've tried to bring forward many different proposals, and in fact, one bill that I think is actually taking us backwards in the discussion about workforce development is Senate Bill 81, which for all intensive purposes guts building South Dakota and takes away the workforce development funding for the Workforce Development Fund. And I think that's problematic when we're having a discussion about workforce and the importance of workforce development, the importance of education as it relates to workforce development. So those career and technical education dollars are going to be limited, and I think that sets us in the wrong direction. And so I definitely have concerns about that. We're still discussing, openness and transparency in government. We had Senate Bill 100 yesterday, which for the most part was a very good bill. A lot of those ideas came out of Government Operations and Audit Committee, and we support those. The one piece that I think could have been improved was the record retention piece of that, which our caucus and myself tried to amend Senate Bill 100 yesterday. We were unsuccessful in that bid, but maybe the conversation can continue in the House side as to how do we improve that bill to give us all the tools that we need as far as it relates to fiscal records and retaining those records for a longer period of time. So Senate Bill 100 does the 7-year record retention, but the problem is it's very limited in scope as to those fiscal records. And I think we need to expand that. I think we need to expand it to 10 years of records retention, because that would have captured the issues with Gear Up. And so with that, I think that we have 2 weeks left. There's still always a lot that goes on in the last 2 weeks, and we'll be very busy with our work. But we have a lot of big priorities to come to agreement on, hopefully, as it relates to the budget. And so that will probably take over the conversation in the next couple of weeks here. And you'll have conference committees and all that as well. So with that, open up for questions.
What are some of your biggest takeaways from legislation that's died so far this session, and that which will live on into the next 2 weeks?
That will live on. Hopefully they stay dead, most of them. So I guess I don't know that I could say there's a big takeaway from that standpoint on, things come back that surprise you sometimes that you think are dead. And I guess I'm not aware of anything that's bubbling under the surface right now that somebody's planning to bring back. I don't know. You got anything on your side?
Most everything that was, there's been a lot of smokeouts that we've seen from committees, and I think there's some frustration from people that feel like maybe what's going on in committee isn't representative of the full body of the Senate, I think is why you're seeing a lot of smokeouts. I don't know what to blame that on, I guess, but we've certainly had probably more than I can remember. And I guess we'd have to go back and look and see how often smokeouts have occurred. But for those listening, smokeout is when we vote to bring a bill to be considered by the Senate floor that died in committee. And it only takes a third of the body to smoke a bill out, and then we have to vote to calendar, and then we have to vote on the actual merits of the bill. And so there seems to be a lot of those bills where that occurred, and I don't know that I have an answer as to why that is, but certainly more than what I remember in past years. This has been an interesting session to the degree that I don't think there ever was a theme that came through. Typically, as we've stated, the governor would have some kind of big initiative. I was kind of hoping this was going to be a session of discussions about workforce development, and that didn't really occur. The governor talked about it in his State of the State, and we really haven't had much of a conversation about it. And I think that is one of the biggest issues facing South Dakota is workforce development and housing. And even many of the measures that came out of the housing study this summer were tabled as talking about a broader conversation about building South Dakota and that fund, and frankly, that discussion hasn't occurred.
There've been a lot of bills that came up in session about the initiative and referendum process. Some have passed on, some have not.
I'll start first because you're going to have to finish it because we've sent them all over to the Senate, and we haven't slowed many of them down on the House side. So, as you know, there's been in excess of 20 bills, I think, and another 10 joint resolutions in changing initiated measures, limiting initiated measures, referred law, constitutional amendments, and gotten to the point where we just oppose them all, just from the sheer magnitude of all of it. If they were to come out with a focus of here's what we think is really important to change, we might have had a better discussion. It was just a total blanketing of everything against it, period. As you know, I made the statement on the floor, if you really just want to stop the initiative process and referral process, bring a bill and let's have the discussion on the floor. And forget this total trying to change every facet of the law and make it totally impossible to put it on the ballot for people. And when we started, if you remember at the very beginning, our discussion was we're open-minded to discussion if we can make the process more transparent and what's happening. We were supportive of that side of the process, but it went to more of just trying to throttle down the process and make it virtually impossible. If all these bills get through the Senate, I'm so confused right now, I don't know what the initiative process would be if all these bills get through. And the only answer we get from the other side is trust us. We're going to fix this so we don't have a problem at the other end with all these bills. Well, I haven't seen much trust come through yet that I feel comfortable this comes through, but they're headed your way, so I guess you're probably the one that's going to be the best answer on it.
Yeah, I mean, our approach is just going to be to try to take one at a time and judge them on their merits. I've been very outspoken about my concern of the attack on the initiative process, and I don't think that speaks well for this body. I mean, as we've said before, that we were the first state in the nation to allow the initiative and referendum process. I think it was in 1898. And people hold that dear. I mean, it's a part of our fabric to be able to go to the ballot and voice your opinion on issues or to refer laws that you disagree with and let the public decide. And I have a real frustration that I've said it before and I'll say it again, that we trust the voters to send us to peer, and then there seems to be a lack of trust for what the voters are going to decide as it relates to initiatives and referendums, and I think that's wrong. So we're gonna keep looking at these bills one at a time to make sure that we're giving them a full and fair consideration. But I go back to, we had a task force on this summer, and many of those bills passed out of the Senate, and I think there was some agreement on some of the changes, and many of those were bipartisan to improve the process, not to attack it. And many of these bills are seeking to attack it, and I'm just fundamentally opposed to that.
We did just have 4 of the Senate bills in State Affairs this morning, and that came out of the interim committee, and we passed those 4 out of State Affairs. So those have been moving along without much opposition. So, any other questions?
So the Senate's going to have Senator Russell's sanctuary cities bill up on the floor. Do you have any sense of your position on that in the caucuses?
Yeah, I don't know that we've taken a caucus position on it. I mean, I can say I know we haven't taken a caucus position on it, and we're going to be discussing that more as we go along. My personal belief is, I don't know that to me it doesn't change anything. We don't have sanctuary cities in this state, so, but part of me is also saying, you know what, we're a country of laws, we're a state of laws, and we should follow those laws. And so that's probably where I'm gonna come down on it right now. And the reality is that this is another one of those pieces of legislation that is a distraction to what we should really be focusing on. We should be focusing on workforce development and growing our economy and trying to find common ground on things, rather than bringing legislation that I don't no is needed.
The Senate could also reconsider Senator Nelson's concealed carry bill for military members. Do you have any sense of whether that would be reconsidered on the floor?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the vote on that was. Was it 16 to 18 or something like that? I don't remember. We had quite a few votes yesterday, but it's hard to get people to switch when you bring a reconsideration motion. I think it's especially hard when just the reconsideration, it really isn't about voting on the merits of the bill. It's just about, do we want to have the discussion again? And so I think it's difficult for people to change their minds. A lot of people want to be consistent in how they've handled things, and so I guess we'll see. I'm certainly seen issues where you can swing a couple votes here and there, but I would bet that with all this going on, it's probably not likely that motion will pass. But I could be wrong on that too.
Did you have any heartache opposing Senator Hunoff on the 14th bill?
Senator Hunoff is a good friend of mine. I always have heartache when I have to oppose somebody that I consider, a good friend and a good guy. But the reality of the situation was that I have Fort Randall Casino in my district, and the surrounding towns were very concerned about the impact to their economy. And it's my job to represent my district to the best of my ability. And I heard overwhelmingly that folks in my district that were going to be affected by this did not want to see it. But I understand what Yankton's trying to do, and every community should be looking for ways to grow. And so I greatly respect what they're trying to accomplish, and it's certainly a challenge. I think there could be some middle ground found as a result of this measure, whether it passes or not. That's one that I think it's probably pretty unlikely that it's going to get reconsidered, because I think there were only 12 votes for it, and so you got to switch 6 people. It's going to be tough. But I think it's going to bring a good conversation, and if this project does move forward in the future, I think there will be more discussions between the tribes and Yankton, and a good discussion about gaming in general and the effect of our economy through gaming.
Senator Rhodes, House 176, it's the opioid prosecutor bill that was passed out of the Senate yesterday. Can you talk about your views on that bill?
Yeah, this was kind of one of those concepts that was just brought here recently, obviously, since we're hog-housing a bill to this degree, but it seems to be that there's potentially some opportunities to go after the manufacturers of opioids, and I think that's an interesting conversation. And so what we're trying to do is to create the tools to do that, and to hold accountability to what has occurred as it relates to opioids nationally and in our state. And so I think it's a good conversation to have, and that's why I supported it on the floor. And I do think that bill will probably need to go to appropriations at some point for that discussion, because we'll have to adjust our budget as it relates to that bill.
Good. Just a couple quick comments. I know we're headed to the budget side, and we didn't make a comment, but I think it's important to say our priorities going forward. We want to see state employees. We can't go a second year without a freeze, in my mind, for state employees. We need to see what we can do there. Our K-12, last year, after our 2 years ago passage of the half-penny tax and increased salaries, we reduced the amount we were supposed to give them last year, and this year, as you know, it's none. So I think we need to see what we can do for our K-12. It's important we figure out how to put money. There's not much money out there, like $18 million of new money over what the governor's budget was. And in the community support providers, I think are our priority for us. And we've talked briefly about it. We haven't sat down with priorities between the two houses, but I know coming from the House side, that's been our discussions. And from what I'm gathering, there's a similar focus across the aisle. So I think this could be more friendly at the end of session than it's been in past years, because there's kind of a unity of vision, I think. And I'm speaking out of turn for them, but we'll find out next week. I understand they made the announcement that we're going to try to do the joint press conference. Excited for that. We'll see how that goes. We do work good across the aisle, so I think it'll be a friendly discussion, but it'll be fun to have.
Well, yeah, just to comment on the budget priorities, I mean, I think that's broadly true. That there is some one-time money available in FY18 that I would like to see targeted towards, building South Dakota. Needs-based scholarships has been a big discussion, and it's something that Board of Regents had requested. That in the governor's budget said, no, we can't do that. We don't have the money. We support the needs-based, but we don't have the money. And now that there's some, especially when you look at some of this one-time money, I think that's a real opportunity for us as it relates to needs-based scholarship. So I think that's something that I personally and our caucus is going to get behind. It's something we believe in is very important for the future of South Dakota, is making sure kids can get an education and have the opportunities that we all had. And so that's going to be a focus moving forward. I am looking forward to the joint press conference next round, especially because 3 of the 4 people that will be sitting in front of you live in the same house. And so we get to have some fun conversations when we get home from the Capitol anyway. And so we'll bring Kurt in, and he can kind of join us for a while. But we have already been having these discussions already. So.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time.